So, what should theologians do to turn this face of God, the compassionate God, the life-giving God, the God who wants the people to flourish, that Christian God who wants the earth to flourish? How do you and theologians work to turn this beautiful face of God to those followers? It's not the gospel, a gospel of equality. There is no male or female. And the earth is so precious if you really interpret the gospel and the Bible in the right way. So tell us about how you would approach a Bible story through the eyes of an indigenous person. Any Bible story.
Before doing that, you know, I come from a very poor neighbor in La Paz, and I had to struggle so much in my daily life so I can become theologian. And for me, it was a surprise to be working in the WCC. I come from a very rude experience of life. I was working in the church, but I was also working as theologian, and I was so well connected with indigenous movements and women's movements in La Paz. So from that root experience, I was brought to the WCC to a world level experience of work. So it was such a change in my life, and it was so much challenging to my own positions as indigenous women theologian. So that was quite an experience, but it's already 2.5 years. It's not so much, but I was able to understand how the logics of the system works. And I am sure that you may realize that there is a clash of logics. We think in one system, and usually the hegemonic system thinks in another logic. So even if we try to approach and to understand that logic of domination, we can't, because we cannot renounce to our starting points in doing reflection or in living. So there is really a clash of logics that can be seen in the UN, because the UN imposes a kind of rules and ways to do politics and to convince the states, and it clashes with the indigenous protests and proposals for life. We can see very well that in the UN system, about the UN Permanent Forum, the mechanism of experts, indigenous peoples are saying for decades the same thing, but it's not possible for the system to understand because they don't work in the same logic, in the same thinking framework. So it's just that. In the theological level, I have realized the same. While the official theology and official church works in a thinking, in a framework, in a logic, Western logic, we work in another logic. They would say, some of my colleagues, very high-level theologians, would say, we work in the doctrines and in the abstract, the pure theology, while you work in the grassroots, in the daily life experience. What you bring really is experience, not theology. They would say that to me. So they put themselves in a highest level, and we are in the grassroots level. It's a hierarchy inside the theology. It's the patriarchy which is inside the theology, because the abstract, the hegemonic theology is a male theology. So God is without any sex, without any color, without any race. And we are doing contextual theologies.
Yes.
In plural. I think it's a sin for the church and the theology. It's just a sin. We cannot accept that. How can the love of God be present while we are just undervaluating one Christian faith experience? It's not just possible. You can see that in the women's level. Our hierarchies are made up by male. They don't want women. Even if women are supporting and strengthening the church, women are not present, even represented in the church. So that's a sin.
It is.
We need to name that as a sin. So I think what we are proposing is to deconstruct deeply the theology and to bring new proposals so we can have a new dimension of theology. What indigenous are bringing is not just the voice of one sector of the society. We want to universalize our proposal, because we are not just struggling for indigenous people. We are struggling both in the UN system and in theological sphere. We are talking about the salvation and the healing of this world. We know that our world is in a crisis and is dying. We are killing the Mother Earth. How can we shift the logic of the mainstream society? How can we bring new paradigms of life so we can seek together the life? It cannot be just the struggle of our sector.
Yes.
That's why we want to universalize our protests and our proposals. We will be continuing to do so, always. It is up to the church to decide if they want to walk this path with us or not.
And already so many theologies have challenged patriarchy, whether it is womanist theology, Mahorista theology, feminist theology, Minjung theology, and indigenous theologies. They have already challenged patriarchy. So I think at this point in history, there are theologies, not one theology. And as for women, experience, the body matters, and that also has been articulated by feminist theology. And from your sharing, I understand your fight is twofold. You are fighting against big systems like UN, for your voices to be heard, and also inside the church, that your voices be heard. And lay women have always struggled hard. Of course, for indigenous lay women, the struggle is more. Now, we share the same Bible. And I may be reading the Bible in a different way. Tell us how you read the Bible through a pair of indigenous eyes. Could you just share a story from the Bible?
Well, once again, it would be necessary to develop more that. I think you're asking me for the hermeneutical criteria that we use to approach the Bible.
It does not matter. You could approach the Bible through experience. Yes.
But experience would be one of the hermeneutical criteria which we use to approach the Bible. And indeed, is that the case? When we read the Bible, we read with our experience, with our cultural background. So there are some criteria, which I name hermeneutical criteria, no? Criterios hermeneuticos. So I think one is the communitarian style of life. We go through the Bible looking and wondering how the Bible expresses the communitarian style of life of the peoples in the Bible. The other aspect would be to look for the land issues. The people of the Bible is very close to the land. And we do know that the promise of the land, the promised land, is also very rich in the Bible. So we try to challenge, to evaluate these kind of concepts, because Christians were thinking that they received from God the land of the promise, but actually it was our lands. No? So we try to challenge that processes. So community, land issues, and that would be two of the criteria. And then the oral tradition. We are a people of oral tradition. Bible was the experience of the oral tradition people. Then it was write it down.
Yes.
But originally it was the oral tradition. But then we seek also a presence of God very related with the nature. So we look at that experiences. We also look at the relation of the bodies inside the Bible, how people interact in the Bible, how the bodies feel like. So how these people place the dynamics of power, for instance. We try to look at that because we experience that kind of unjust relations in our daily life. And we look also to strengthen our possessions from the Bible. I guess some of the protests of the indigenous peoples were very, very inspired in the prophetical movement in the Bible. So we just claim from the voice of our ancestors, for instance, for our land rights, but we also claim from the prophetical experiences in the Bible. Our search, for instance, for new paradigms to reconnect with the nature also could be understood in relation with the wisdom tradition in the Bible, where God was present deeply in the cosmos through the wisdom. So I think the criterios hermeneuticos would be those who look for community, for new names and expressions of God, for the land issues, for the relation of the bodies, especially of those of women, and children. Since we look for the community, we always would think in all the ages in the community also.
Yes, and it resonates with the United Methodist Women because United Methodist Women as an organization is also about building community, women, children, and youth. And from your insight, I think it strengthens us that we should approach the Bible as a community also, and looking for all those wonderful criteria that you have pointed out, land, nature, prophetic voice, and the body experiences of people from ground up. But still I'm pushing you. Is there one story you could mention from the Bible which is very closer to the heart of the indigenous women?
It's very hard because I am thinking so many stories from the Bible. But I think one which has worked very well in the experience of indigenous Methodist women, I am Methodist in Bolivia, is that of the women who transform in Jesus, the Syrophoenician woman, who was not a Jewish, she was just calling for the healing of her daughter, and she was telling Jesus, even the dogs needs to eat. I think that story was a very precious history for us, because Black people can recognize their traces in the Bible, in the roots of the Bible, because they can trace their presence in the Bible since the origins. But we as indigenous, we cannot have a presence in the Bible like other peoples have, because as you have said, Christianism and the Bible was imposed on us. How can we discover our presence in the Bible? So I think through that kind of histories, as the Syrophoenician woman, we discovered that we were present in the Bible, and we were challenging and transforming even the presence and the proposals of Jesus. Jesus was forced to open the doors of salvation, and it was because of the need of healing. We need to be healed as indigenous communities, because there is so much damage that the Christianism and the colonial system is doing still to our communities.